Hello friends, my name is Void. I am a cosmic creature that has come from the abyss, and I came to New Zealand to make video games. Today what we are doing is we are going to be having a look at a video game that I've been making. It's this little game called Necromancer. We're going to be having a look at the whole sort of history of the development cycle and how everything's sort of progressed from the beginning. And, yeah, just kind of try to get that all down in a video, because I didn't really do any proper sort of devlog or anything like that. What I'm probably going to do is mostly go through the Facebook page, sort of especially during the early days. I ended up being sort of reasonably active with actually putting all of the different goings on and updates and that kind of thing on the Facebook page. I'll probably have to start piecing together what I've been doing after that. So this is going to be an adventure for you as much as I. So it's going to be it's going to be interesting. Probably the very first thing would actually be Necromancer version 1, which is not even basically not even the same game as what is on demo on Steam at the moment. Oh yeah, that reminds me, I should probably post the Steam link so anyone who doesn't know what I'm talking about has a little bit more context. So yeah, so here we go. So this is the Steam page for Necromancer, and this is the current sort of iteration of it. You know, after some time, it'll probably end up developing into an actual fully released game. At the moment, it's just a demo, so yeah, we'll probably need a fair bit more time and work and hopefully some funding before it gets fully released. But yeah, but this is the state that it's in at the moment. So just to start off, let's have a look at Necromancer version 1, which is on Twitch, sorry, not Twitch, itch. So you can sort of see on the itch page the original Necromancer. So this was basically a sort of project that I was doing. Initially, it was kind of just a little bit of a portfolio piece. I just noticed my avatar is kind of like a little bit slunk down into the corner. Let me just move myself up a little bit. But yeah, so initially this was kind of, yeah, just meant to be, I guess, a practice project, or just attempt at making something that was kind of cool to go into a programming portfolio, to just show that I was actually learning programming and, you know, doing stuff outside of, you know, just what I was doing for day jobs and that kind of thing. Just something to play around with, especially with Unity and C# and sort of learning how to make games. So this is the very first version of Necromancer. It was the first iteration of my Void logo. So I made this one in WebGL. Same menu music for anyone who has played the current version of it. So that tune has sort of carried through into the newer version of it as well. I may change that in the newer version and sort of remaster it or something like that. I'm having a look at getting some people on board for audio. If we end up sort of workshopping that, it's very likely to sort of change. I made this track myself, but mastering and audio engineering isn't necessarily my strong suit, so it would probably be a good idea eventually to get a better version of it that's kind of a little bit more professionally mastered, let's say. So yeah, let's go ahead and full screen this bad boy. The original version had a little bit more of a sort of techno soundtrack. So this was initially meant to be sort of like a dungeon crawler type deal, and you sort of progress from left to right. You kill some dudes. So I think I can't actually resurrect until I get next to them. But yeah, but if I get next to one of them, then I can resurrect some bad boys, and I can heal, just like in the current version. Oh man, why am I so bad at this game? I have to consume corpses to be able to heal. I completely forgot that I made that mechanic, which is actually kind of a decent mechanic in terms of, like, you have to stay in the game and that kind of thing. So I've got other weapons as well, aside from just the shotgun. There's a sort of, what do you call it, a spawner, and if I kill that, then enemies don't spawn anymore, and I've essentially cleared the room. There was only 3 weapons that I ended up adding into the game at that point. So there was sort of like a orb firing thing, and then there was the gauntlets, which are in the current iteration of Necromancer as well. And the gauntlets are actually pretty broke in this game. And then there's the shotgun. I think the shotgun in this is probably closest to the sledgehammer in the current iteration. And yeah, I still really want to make something that has this kind of power and is a real blaster of a shotgun. When the sound design and everything is all sorted out, that's probably going to feel pretty good to use. I completely forgot what this thing in the middle is. I think that was supposed to be like a power-up or a pickup, or like loot or something that you get at the end of a room. So after that, we just kind of go to the next room. Yeah, and then you get to the next room and sort of rinse and repeat. Let's try some of the other weapons out. So this is kind of like, you can just hold it down and just just sort of let things die. But then if I change to the gauntlets, you can see that I could just basically stand right up and absolutely eviscerate things. So, yeah. Gauntlets are very broke in this game, and so once that room's done, then you just go ahead and head to the next room. With the amount of time that I spent developing this game, I'd only had so much time spent on it, so I didn't build too many levels. Basically, what I've shown you so far is all that really ended up happening with version 1. I basically just had these 3 levels that it sort of randomly chooses between or cycles between, because yeah, I didn't get the chance to build more levels, because yeah, level design at this stage was not something that I was super good at or knew how to tackle. This particular version of Necromancer took me something like 6 months to build. It was pretty fun, and it taught me a lot, but I think what kind of held me back from continuing to develop this was just the sheer amount of time involved, mostly in animation, because I did all the animation myself as well and drew all of these sprites, but to make high quality sprites that actually looked like they fit in the world and felt like they were sort of reasonably appropriate and of a certain quality, it was kind of just a lot of work. It felt like it was a sort of tedium that took a heck of a lot of time, and it was sort of taking away from doing other things like, you know, just developing the code or developing the gameplay. So I kind of ended up maybe stopping because it felt pretty unfeasible, and it just felt like way too much work making the visual side of it work. But yeah, but anyway, so that is Necromancer version 1, and that is basically around about all that went into it. But that is pretty much, you know, the initial idea behind it, or, you know, what was initially intended. I still want to make a dungeon crawler kind of game. If this version of the current version of Necromancer ends up being successful, that's probably something that I'm looking at as doing as kind of a prequel or something like that. The scope and the amount of things that would need to be built to get the dungeon crawler version working is probably just way, way, way bigger than, you know, the current iteration, which is a little bit more self-contained and just able to be sort of done in a reasonable sort of scope. So I still really, really want to have that actually become a full game at some point, but yeah, I'll probably need a fair bit of funding and need to plan it out a little bit better. So that was V1. Next up, eventually, after I think taking a good long break, I ended up starting development on V2. So let me have a look at some of the videos that I've got in my library. So I think there's a few videos in V1. So let me just have a quick look at those. So yeah, so this was the actual development of V1, and this is very, very, very early on when I was still sort of setting up the initial levels. And you can see I did this really weird thing that was sort of a way of faking 2D in 3D by sort of angling things like this. It kind of worked. It allowed me to have sort of like a Z-axis angle. But yeah, I'm not exactly sure how sustainable that was in the long run. It ended up being kind of a lot of work. But yeah, so this was the initial stages of Necromancer. So when was that? That was July the 3rd, 2019. So yeah, and then yeah, you can see that the very early sprites were very Doom-inspired. Doom and Heretics, so you can see that the Revenants have always been a thing, even back in V1, and they were actually based off the Revenants in Heretic. And then you can see that we've got the little Arachnotrons being the other enemy, or the ranged enemy type. I'm getting flashbacks now of like silly bugs and that kind of thing. So say, for example, you kill everything, and then the animation sprite for the Revenants is just kind of stuck, so they're just attacking nothing for some reason. So that was a good time. Yeah, so that was, yeah, July 2019. Then here was just some videos looking at the animation stuff that I was doing, so trying to get like a walking cycle going. The reason why I'm moving the animation window is to try and like test out, you know, like what it looks like when I'm actually walking. Animation is not something that I'm super good at, so I don't know if the way that he's moving is the way that I really want it. I think, yeah, because I was trying to make it look like he was aiming sort of side on, but like still walking relative to the camera or something, kind of just made for this weird kind of prancing motion, which is kind of funny. But yeah, but that was the stage that I was at back then. And yeah, so eventually I ended up changing the animation to be something more like this. And it was, yeah, like kind of like a sidestep. You end up, yeah, kind of having that sidestep relative to the camera based on, you know, like the whole progressing from the left side of the room to the right side of the room generally. And yeah, like thinking about it, the progression of left to right as just the constant way that you're progressing through the rooms would end up being really linear. I was thinking of having, like doors or staircases or something like that that'll allow you to progress, in a not so linear fashion, but it ended up being pretty linear, at least with that, little bit that I ended up doing for Necromancer version 1. There's a few videos looking at the development cycle of Necromancer v1. I do not even remember what stuff I was testing at this point. It's so long ago. Oh yeah, so I think at this stage, so that was, July 19th, so a couple of weeks later, had a, like a little bit of the movement working, a little bit of the sort of gameplay angle and positioning and everything. And then, like the combat was starting to get there. And yeah, like a whole bunch of free sound effects from, what do you call it? I think most of the free sound effects are just from like freesound.org, which is a great website for anyone who just wants some easy sound effects to just put in there, especially for prototyping. And yeah, I'm sort of starting to get the animations going. You can see that the sprites are sort of under construction and that kind of thing. And yeah, now we're getting closer to like an actual game, and it's starting to look a little bit more video game like. I think this is when I started getting like the ability to resurrect going, and corpses that are left on the ground that you can start resurrecting and fighting, and then they'll start fighting the other enemies. And so yeah, so that was starting to get there, and so that was 24th of July. So, yeah, not too long after the original inception. I think this... Oh, yeah, so I think what I'd added at this point was the blood splatters. Which I have yet to add in the current version of Necromancer, so that's something that I really do need to add. There's a bunch of stuff in here that I have working in V1 that I still have yet to get working in what's now V3. And yeah, I think, I don't know, there's just been like a whole bunch of different reasons why I just haven't been doing that. The main reason why I haven't got blood splatter in V3 is just performance reasons. Yeah, shadows and blood splatters are actually something that I tried to get working pretty early on in V1, but I just haven't actually done it in V3. Or I think with shadows and lighting in V3, because I've done a bunch of custom shaders for the ground, they don't work too well with shadows at the moment. The ground shader in V3 is actually the first custom shader I've ever built. So it looks interesting, but there's probably a bunch of technical details that prevent it from working the way that it really should. August 2019, and so it's starting to have the aesthetic and the sort of the dingy tomb vibes that I wanted a little bit more. So I think at this point I'd added the shotgun. You can see me sort of like developing or looking at the sprite work for the shotgun. So yeah, so you can sort of see Necromancer version 1 like kind of slowly coming together. I don't know what this... Oh yes, I was getting resurrection animations and that kind of thing. A lot of these videos, I don't know what I was recording specifically, but just kind of, recording some stuff. And I think that was me getting like a menu sequence sort of going, just getting some more lighting. Oh yeah, so that was... So I think spawning is now a thing. So you can see that enemies are kind of just spawning in from miscellaneous spawn points. This is when the gameplay loop of version 1 was sort of starting to come together. So I think at this point, this is where we got the actual level design getting a little bit more like what it ended up looking like at the end. So this is, yeah, August 2019. But I mean, like, so after roughly, basically a month of development, a lot of the core gameplay loop was actually kind of going. I remember it distinctly taking something like 6 months, but I don't know what sort of happened, because I think at a certain point, maybe I kind of started running out of steam, or because of, what I was saying with the difficulty of animation, I think that was when I started kind of slowing down a little bit on this development. Alright, so I think, yeah, now I'd started building the actual spawn points, kind of something that can spawn units, but also can be killed so that you can get some progress. And yeah, now you've got level progression as well. You can actually sort of move between the levels. Now we're up to September 2019. And yeah, I think now the resurrection and sort of custom sprites and everything was kind of a little bit more sealed in. Oh yeah, so I got a custom sprite just for the Revenants, or what's not Revenants anymore, but they were called Blood Revenants or something like that. And so now we're looking at the end of September 2019. Oh yeah, now I don't have just some screenshot from American Gods. Now I have an actual splash screen that I drew that took Probably not that long. I think I did that in about a day or two. So that view that you're sort of looking at the moment is, if you start getting into the lore of Necromancer, which yes, there is going to be lore. This is the sort of outside view of what in the universe is going to be called the Great Crypts. So without getting into the lore too much, the idea is that there's these special sort of massive crypts that were made to sort of conduct a lot of sort of research into necromancy. The sort of approach that I'm taking with Necromancer in terms of the general setting of it is kind of something along the lines of, let's say, science fantasy. There's a lot of a fantastic sort of element, and there's kind of a lot of magical stuff, but there's also a fair bit of let's say science. I mean, it's basically still magic, but it's got at least an attempt to try and be scientific about it. There's the idea that they had these giant crypts that they did as a bunch of sort of research and stuff with. They ended up sort of pouring a lot of time and effort into uncovering eldritch secrets and that kind of thing. So the greatest power that you can attain as a necromancer is usually found inside of these great crypts. So this is just sort of right outside of a great crypt just before you enter it. And the idea is that Necromancer version 1 is you progressing through the great crypts and actually, yeah, doing the sort of dungeon crawl part of it. Whereas Necromancer version 2 or version 3, which is the current iteration, you're actually at the end of the dungeon crawl. And you're actually fighting essentially the final boss of the whole dungeon crawl experience. And you're just about to start attaining that ultimate necromancy power kind of deal. The shape of the giant crypt is actually just this giant resurrected body. So the idea is that the necromancers eventually got to the point where so much research had been done into necromancy and there'd been so much progress into it that they could create summoned constructs that were just absolutely humongous. The shape and size of that skull that you see there kind of gives you an idea of the sort of scale that their summoned constructs ended up getting to. So they started becoming just absolutely massive, and then yeah, so much so that they could just resurrect entire structures and that kind of thing. And yeah, there's a whole bunch of other lore stuff and how absolutely crazy the necromancy power stuff ended up getting over time. But that's a story for another time, or probably something to be discovered in the actual lore of Necromancer v3 when that actually ends up being implemented. So yeah, and then what's this? Oh yeah, there we go. There's Necromancer v 1.5. No, I'm just kidding. This is from Devil Daggers, so if anyone's played Devil Daggers, then you could probably see at about what point the inspiration for Necromancer v2 ended up sort of coming up. So Devil Daggers was definitely a giant inspiration for the current iterations of Necromancer. So it looks like I discovered that around February 2020. Yep, so not too long before the whole coronavirus thing started happening. I think this was me taking videos of me actually getting PBs and that kind of thing. I think this is the first time I ever got the level 4 hand. So yes, I think that was a very proud moment for me. I've got a whole bunch of recorded videos of the first time that I did something cool in Devil Daggers. But anyway, that is stuff for another time. So I think April 16th, by the looks of it, is when V2 actually ended up being developed.